Here's another one. It was a study in the Netherlands, and they had people come in, and they would have them do some mundane survey or a really boring, click when you see this little T appear in the visual search task. And they would then give them a cookie and some milk. It was a really crumbly cookie, and it would make a mess all over the table. And what the actual experiment they were doing was they didn't care about the survey, or maybe it was part of some undergraduate's project. What they were looking at is whether people cleaned up after themselves or not, whether they cleaned up the crumbs and threw away the paper cup that the milk came in. And the manipulation that they were doing was to either have the room smell as it normally does, or to have lemon-scented cleaner wafting in the room. And the people in the condition with the lemon-scented cleaner incorporated that somehow into their behavior and were far more likely to clean up after themselves. Some people stayed for about 5-10 minutes, scraping up all of the crumbs, putting them in a cup, and placing it carefully into the garbage receptacle. So even something as simple as a smell can be associated with this fairly complex behavior. And what was really interesting is that they did a follow-up with all of the conditions, and they asked them whether they noticed anything interesting. And I think they had 30 subjects in total, and none of them detected that there was a smell. None of them thought that there was a particular kind of smell in the room. So the environment has all these sensory feelings in it, all these things in the environment, and we incorporate them into our behavior. We incorporate them into the decisions we make. Next time you're in a wine store or something, listen carefully to the music and think about what kind of wine you're buying. So here's some more interesting ones, possibly in line with some of the things Rob was talking about earlier. This is a picture of a mall. I'm assuming everyone here has been in a mall at some point or other in their life. There's a woman called Elizabeth Loftus who does a lot of studies in memory. And she did this one thing which has a ridiculously complex name. It's called the Familial Informant False Narrative Procedure. And what she did was questionably ethical, but she brought children in with someone they trusted, an older sibling or a parent, and had the parent tell them a lie about their childhood. In this case, it was about that one time. You remember you got lost in the mall? It was horrible. You were crying. You couldn't find any of us. And this elderly woman, she found you, and she took you to the lost children and made sure that you were reunited with the family, and it was all happy. And at first, the kids are like, what? But ask them a day later or a week later, they totally remembered this thing that never happened. They incorporated a completely false memory into their actual memory, and they actually added details to it to make it fit better. So they're saying, like, yeah, and the old lady, she bought me a cookie or a lollipop while I was waiting at the stand. And they've incorporated this completely fabricated memory into their experience. And that's why this paradigm, which has been replicated so many times, is now called the lost in the mall paradigm, because the original name, which I don't even remember, was kind of long. Here's another one. How many of you know what this is a picture of? Yes, the Challenger explosion. It was the subject of much media when it happened, and cognitive psychologists, being sort of very opportunistic, decided, hey, let's study memory with this. And they asked people to write about their experience when they found out about the Challenger explosion, where they were, what they were doing. People talk about these things similarly now with 9/11. People remember what they were doing, where they were, how they felt when they found out about it. Or in another study that they did, they asked people about where were you when you heard the O.J. Simpson trial verdict? Which is, I don't know. It's called a flashbulb memory. It's the idea that if a very impactful event happens, very emotionally charged, and a lot of people are talking about it after it's happened, it sort of goes off like a flashbulb, and you have that image, that moment in time, frozen into your memory forever and ever, and you're never going to forget it, and you're going to remember exactly where you were and what you're doing when it happened. So some researchers decided to test that idea. They had people write down their memory of the event 1 week after it happened. They had them write down their memory of the event 11 months after it happened, and then 32 months after it happened. And they found that people's memories of the event, their own self-reported memories, which they all, by the way, agreed with perfect accuracy, perfect vividness, yes, this is exactly the memory I have, I know it's right, changed over time. Major details changed over time. How they felt, where they were at the time, who they were with, who told them, how they found out. One person saw it on TV. 32 months later, they said, yeah, a friend told me I was working out at the gym. So think about your memory of when you found out about, for example, 9/11. How accurate is that? It's a good question. So memory is unreliable, perhaps. Here's another one. One of the major places where this sort of research comes into play is eyewitness testimony. A lot of the time, a court case will rely pretty heavily on a couple of eyewitnesses coming out to the stand and saying, yes, I saw that man or that car crash into that person or shoot that guy or mug that lady. And the jury will go, well, how confident are you in that memory? And they say, oh, yes, very, very confident. So researchers have been testing this, and they would show people a video of a car crash. And then afterwards, they would ask them questions about it. And the questions were things like, in one group, they would ask, how fast do you think the car was going when it hit the telephone pole? And in the other group, they would ask them, how fast do you think the car was going when it smashed into the telephone pole? And if you can guess, the group that was asked how fast it was going when it smashed estimated about 10 miles per hour more than the other group. And they were also more likely to report broken glass when there definitely wasn't any in the video. So research like that sort of suggests that if you have a very clever lawyer, he asks the witness leading questions that use these kinds of contextual words, he can change their memory of the event. So if we can believe things that never actually happened, if we can change our memories over time, and if we can be influenced by people asking questions about our memory, it seems that memory is unreliable at best and completely mutable at perhaps the other best, for cognitive psychologists anyway.